And please, Professor, tell us more about mushrooms. We really want to hear everything you know about of mushrooms.
Hello. I will talk something about mushroom through the history and what is the future trend in the study of mushroom. Okay, now I think that is okay. Yes. We will talk about mushroom through history, how people use mushrooms, and I don't like this term mushrooms because mushrooms is only one small group of fungi which possess fruiting bodies known as mushroom. I want to talk now about micromycetes. This means all fungi which possess visible fruiting bodies. This is not important which kind of fruiting bodies. Is it mushrooms or some apothecia, typical or atypical? But some fungal species which possess visible fruiting bodies. And this is only title, mushrooms and man from past to future, but I will talk about micromycetes. Fungi originate from silur, and you can see about 438 million years ago, and diversity has particularly grown in Pennsylvania period, and micromycetes originate from have appeared about 300 million years ago. And nowadays, we think that about 1.5 million fungal species exist on our planet. Only about 100,000 species, are known. This means identified and classified. All other species assumed that they exist on the planet. From this 100,000 species, about 14,000 are micromycetes. And here you can see a huge diversity of micromycetes. Their fruiting bodies are very different. From this 14,000 known micromycete species, about 50 to 70% has some degree of edibility. This means possess some nutritional value. Some of these species present very delicious food. Some species do not use as a food because this is not tasty, but they are not poison. About 700 species of these 14,000 known species possess some medicinal effect. This means some biological efficiency or some biological activity. Only 500 species are poison, but only 30 species cause lethal consequence. You have seen a few minutes ago that people or prehistorical men use micromycetes or for diet or in diet or for treatment of some health disease. In 1991, in Alpine Glacier, one corpse was found, and together with this corpse, found small bag, and in that bag, 3 pieces of micromycetes. 2 pieces of Piptoporus betulinus, and one piece of Fomes fomentarius. Their medicinal effect or biological activities have confirmed by numerous studies, but in that period we assumed that they were used like wound healings or stop bleeding, because these species possess very hygroscopic spores and produce spores in huge amount. These species nowadays are used especially in the treatment of some cancer diseases, or these species possess very strong cytotoxic activities. Through the history, in different parts of the world, different species of micromycetes were preferred. And here you can see, I hope that you can see, which species were used either for food, as food, or for treatment of some diseases, or in various rituals. In South America, micromycetes were used for treatment of various diseases and in various rituals, but not as food. And numerous stone figures of mushrooms originated from 13th century BC were found especially in Mexico and Guatemala, but also in some other part of South America. Indians from this part of the world believed that all diseases and all disorders are consequences of the malfunction of spirit. And that's why all diseases and disorders treated with some species of the genus Psilocybe. This genus or species of this genus are also very popular nowadays, and nowadays these species are also used. Also, Indians use Amanita muscaria and prepare some special beverage which gives not only good health but also immortality. They believe that give immortality too. For the stopping bleeding and for treatment of various wounds, Indians use the species from the class Gastromycetes. This means species of the genus Lycoperdon, Govista, Calvatia, Geastrum, and so on and so on. But very important species for some Indians was this Sarcosipha coccinea. This is one of the numerous species from the subphylum Ascomycotica. For the treatment of some more serious diseases like fever or diarrhea or hepatitis or something like that, Indians from South America use Fomes fomentarius and other species of the genus Fomes, but primarily Fomes fomentarius and Fomes officinalis. In Africa, micromycetes cross over the history, and here you can see date that Yoruba people or Yoruba nation from the Nigeria almost 9,000 years used micromycetes, but particularly for the treatment of various diseases. And in the second part of the history, archaeologists found a numerous drawing in the caves in Africa which documented or demonstrate usage of mushroom through the history in Africa. During the hungry months, this means these rainy months in some country in Africa, people use primarily, particularly Termitomyces species, especially Termitomyces microcarpus, but also some other species from the genus Boletus, Agaricus, Ursula, etc. And folk doctors, not only in Nigeria, but also in some countries, in other countries from sub-Saharan Africa, use various, especially Gastromycetes for the treatment of diseases. And you can see here only few samples. Calvatia certiformis for wound healing, various species of the genus Phallus, but primarily Phallus aurantiacus for leprosy treatment, and Termitomyces microcarpus for treatment of gonorrhea. In India, macromycetes were used in various rituals and also for treatment of some disorders, but not like food. It was results of a long-lasting colonization and very strong influence of British tradition. Also, numerous stone figures of mushrooms were found in India. And here you can see which diseases were treated through history by macromycetes. For example, goiter with various species of Agaricus, various species of Bovista and Calvatia for the treatment of bleeding and wounds, etc., etc. Only people from the Kashmir and from the Himalayas use mushrooms, various kinds of mushrooms. Here we can talk about mushrooms because majority of these, of this genus possess mushroom as fruiting bodies. Use, for example, Agaricus, Termitomyces, especially Pleurotus, very tasty species from this genus, for food. The first but serious knowledge about macromycetes came from Far East countries and from Russia, especially China and Japan, and the first also clinical trials were done in Russia. About 1,100 species were used through the history in the China, especially in the China. Less number in Japan and Korea, and especially in China, mushrooms and other macromycetes were put on some kind of throne. And special place on this list of medicinal and edible macromycete species in China possess Ganoderma lucidum or ring Z. Maybe you know this species by Japanese name like reishi, but Ganoderma lucidum or ring Z started to be used in the China and like agent or drug of immortality. The first emperor of China and founder of centralized China was occupied by immortality. And there is one legend that this emperor equipped one expedition, sent this expedition to the east with threat: do not come back without drugs of immortality. This expedition didn't come back, nobody knows why. Maybe they didn't find drugs of immortality, maybe some storm was happened, but emperor searched for these drugs of immortality and found this species. Ganoderma lucidum also nowadays is a symbol of the good happenings, and usually Chinese people buy these fruiting bodies in a nice box and put about the door, like sign or like keeper of the happenings. Through the history, Lindsay was associated with 5 different tastes and believed that each of these tastes heals some things in our body. And here you can see, for example, bitter fruiting bodies are fine for the heart, salty for the kidney, acidic for the liver, hot for the lung, and sweet for the spleen. Later, much more later, at the beginning of 21st century, it was found that each these taste is associated with new species. And that's why nowadays we cannot talk about Ganoderma lucidum. We can talk about Ganoderma lucidum complex. And 10 various species belongs to this complex. This means Ganoderma lucidum sensulatum. In the first pharmacopoeia from the China, from the 16th century, it was reported that Lindsay or Ganoderma lucidum is excellent for the life energy, for the increasing of intellectual capacity and from prevention of forgetfulness. And also during history or through the history, this species was used as tonic, like refreshing agents, and especially for the increasing of organism resistance, because these species possess very strong immunostimulatory effect. Lindsay or Ganoderma lucidum is very popular nowadays also in China, and a few years ago I visited this museum in Nantung, not so far from Shanghai. Whole museum dedicated to one species, to Ganoderma lucidum. And here you can see, for example, this is enters in this museum, and numerous pictures, or this is one chair with Ganoderma lucidum, this is one sculpture of Buddha with Ganoderma lucidum, etc., etc. Besides Ganoderma lucidum in China, very popular was and still is very popular Lentinus sedodes or Xianggu. You maybe know this mushroom species by a Japanese name, shiitake, but Chinese name is Xianggu, and through the history, this species usually was used for aging slowing, but also for the treatment of some diseases. And here you can see all these diseases which were treated by this species. Besides sedodes, very popular was Auricularia auricula, but not only Auricularia auricula, also other species of this genus are very popular and also were very popular, primarily for the straightening of body and wheel, and after that for some other, for treatment of some other disorders. Nowadays, species of the genus Auricularia are very popular like cytotoxic agents, because very strong cytotoxic activity possess not only isolated compounds or metabolites of these species, but also extracts of these species. And usually on the menu of one Chinese man, soup of this mushroom species can be found. During the dynasty Han, in Chinese medicine, some poison species were used. And from this period, we know this sign that in nature there is no such mushroom that could not be used as drug or for treatment of some disease. In Tibet, emperor between or among healthy food or healthy plant were different species of the genus Cordyceps, but primarily Cordyceps sinensis. And nowadays, this is one of the most expensive and most popular species in the world, with numerous biological efficiency and with numerous effort for optimization of their cultivation, but without some specially results in the commercial cultivation of these species. Species of the genus Cordyceps belong to the subphylum Musconicotina, and all species are biotrophs. This means live like parasites and live on these moths, on larvae of these moths, in the places at the very high altitude, for example, on the Himalayas. And this is part of this is Cordyceps sinensis. This means stroma of Cordyceps sinensis. And this stroma possess numerous biological activities. And a few years ago, I found in one pharmacy in the center of Beijing stroma of the Cordyceps sinensis, and the price of only one stroma was 50 euros. In Mongolia, Trichoderma mongolicum traditionally was used in poisoning with low quality meat. And here you can see a beverage which was prepared and which is still prepared in Mongolia for the treatment of people who use low quality meat for the as food, especially for the treatment of some digestion problem and diarrhea. Also in Mongolia was used, Lycopodium bovista was used for healing, wound healing and treatment of burns. And Japan. Japan, the most popular species in Japan were Trichoderma matsutake, Ganoderma lucidum, Lentinus sedodes, and Grifola frondosa. And nowadays, these four species are also very popular, and these species are cultivated, commercially cultivated in Japan. And Japan, or government of the Japan, is the first government in the world who officially put some mushrooms or mushrooms extracts or mushroom products on the list of auxiliary drugs in the combat against various types of cancer of tumors. Besides, I want the first to emphasize Lentinus sedodes. Lentinus sedodes or shiitake through the history was used as food and aphrodisiac, and in Japan this species is known as superstar mushroom, but also this species was used and still is used for the treatment of numerous diseases, but I think that this species is the most efficient in the regulation of blood pressure. And I found results of one in studies that pressure can be normalized if daily one person uses 8 to 10 fruiting bodies of Lentinus sedodes during 2 weeks. And I think that this is very efficient natural drug against high or low blood pressure. Besides blood pressure, this species is very efficient in the normalization of level of cholesterol, triglycerides, and also for some other diseases or disorders, and you can see all these diseases and disorders. In Australia and New Zealand, only few species were used, and also now are used. Only few species. Polyporus militer, known as black bread, is widely used species in Australia, and some species of the genus Auricularia in New Zealand. And Europe, we have two absolutely different pictures in Europe. We have a picture from Eastern Europe and Russia, and the picture from Western European countries. And these pictures are absolutely different. Especially in Russia, but also in other Eastern European countries, mushroom considered as gift of nature. And many mushroom species, especially wild mushroom species, were used as food, but also in many rituals and for treatment of some diseases. You know better this about muscaria than I only have read about Amanita muscaria, but Amanita muscaria is known, especially in Siberia, like god of drunkenness or divine fungus of immortality. And numerous beverages are prepared from this species, especially for the treatment of stomachache, of rheumatic pains, and for better healing of bones and faster healing of bones. And maybe this is interesting that Amanita muscaria and beverage from Amanita muscaria was used as hallucinogenic agents for agitation of creative power in authors of folk heroic stories or songs. In 17th century, in the Moscow, one new center like Pharmaceutical Review or something like that was established, and edict about collection of all medicinal plants by the skilled people sent from the Moscow to all gubernia around Russia, and after some time, some period, obtain absolutely different results. This means that in various parts of Russia, various mushroom species or micromycete species were used. For example, in Perm gubernia, especially Fomis fomentarius, various species of Bovista and Aleuria aurantia were popular. And this is very interesting data for me that, for example, juice from Aleuria aurantia was used for the treatment of cold cow, because some kind of extracts of this mushroom species was added to the drink water of cold cow. On Ural Mountain, Siberia, and pre-Baltic countries in Poland, Inonotus obligus was really very popular species, not only for treatment of stomach and intestine problems, but for treatment of various kinds of cancer, or various types of cancer. And here you can see this kind of cancers, lung, stomach, colon, and skin cancer. But besides Inonotus obligus, which is a very popular species now, and numerous biological efficiency are confirmed by scientific investigation, Felinus nigricans and other Felinus linteus, another species from this genus, and Pictoporus betulinus were very popular in the treatment of various cancer types. And if you remember a few minutes ago, I told you that in Russia, the first clinical trials were done, but serious clinical trials, in the middle of 19th century, and 2 clinical trials with Pictoporus betulinus with positive results. The first in the Moscow, I think 1856 or 58, I'm not sure. Professor Froben from the Moscow University Clinic successfully healed one patient who suffered from the cancer of the glands around the ear. And 4 or 5 years later, one professor from Veliki Luh, St. Petersburg, healed a patient who suffered from lip cancer by this species, Pictoporus betulinus. And these were the first clinical trials, was serious clinical trials in the history. And opposite to the Eastern Europe, and especially Russia, Western Europe or Western European countries, leader England, France, Germany, and Italy. Mushroom or micromycetes were associated with everything bad. This means snakes, scorpions, spiders, something like that. And all forest or wild mushroom species considered as poison species and were not used in food. Maybe in some rituals, but not as food. Usually, various mushroom species were used for elimination of competitors. And there are many samples for that. I put here only one. Romanian Emperor Claudius I was eliminated by his wife Agrippina, and results of this elimination was Neron, or Agrippina's sons, came to the throne. And how Agrippina eliminated Claudius I? The favorite meals prepared from Amanita caesarea. In that meal, Agrippina put source of Amanita phalloides. Amanita phalloides is the most toxic species on the planet, and only few milligrams is enough to poison or to death whole families. Besides elimination of competitors, at the beginning of the 1st century, people used Fomitopsis officinalis, and the Pliny Elder put all these results or this data in his book History of the Nature. But in that time, it was not known about Fomitopsis officinalis. This species was known as agaricum. And here you can see all diseases which could be treated with this species. Small number of micromycetes were used in a diet. You can see here on the different part of the Western European, various species were used in a diet. For example, in Italy, these were species from the genus Boletus and the genus Tuber. And nowadays, these 2 genus or species from these 2 genus are the most popular. Boletus sedulis, especially, and the 2 species from the genus Tuber. In the Germany and Switzerland, Cantorellus tibarius, one mycorrhizal species were used in the diet. And in Spain, one very delicious species and name is describe this kind of delicious Bacterius deliciosus. In Scandinavia, Micromycetes also were not very popular until the end of Second World War. Only Orthodox people next to border with Russia use micromycetes during the fasting. This means about Easter or about Christmas, but only some species, especially Boletus aedes. But after Second World War, this means in the second half of 20th century, opinion or relation toward the mushroom in the Western European countries and in the South America absolutely changed. Primarily due to knowledge about the diversity and about positive characteristics or positive effects of micromycetes. And the second reason, this is development of numerous techniques. Techniques in cultivation and techniques in obtaining of biomass. Not only biomass of mycelium, but also biomass on some metabolites which possess very high biological activity. And this change of relation toward the mushrooms can be demonstrated by cultivation of mushrooms. Look at this data from 1980 to 2008. Commercial cultivation of Lentinus edodes and Pleurotus species increased significantly. And here on this graphs you can see how this commercial production of these two species grow for this almost 40 years. But in different parts of the world, different mushroom species are commercially cultivated. Agaricus bisporus, based on the annual yield, take the first place on the list of commercially cultivated mushrooms. But this species is dominant species only in Western European countries. This means in Netherlands in the leader in Agaricus bisporus production in Europe, and in United States of America. But if we look situation in the Far East countries, for example, China and especially Japan, almost do not grow this species. And maybe this fact is very interesting. In Japan, in 2003, Agaricus bisporus was not cultivated, was not grown. But Far East countries are interested in some other species, especially Lentinus edodes and some species of the genus Pleurotus. For example, Pleurotus citrinopilatus and Pleurotus diamora are very delicious species and cultivated in the, especially in the China, but also in some other countries. Also, Agaricus blazei or Agaricus brasiliensis, numerous taxonomies have very serious debates about name of this species. Is it the same species but two synonyms, Agaricus blazei and Agaricus brasiliensis, or these are two separate species? But I accept this name, Agaricus blazei, and this is very popular cultivated mushroom species in the China. Then Famulina velutipes, very delicious species, especially in Korea. Volvariella volvacea, Hypsisicus marmoreus, Grifola frondosa, and many other species, especially from the genus Auricularia and genus Pleurotus. Today, so many efforts about for optimization of cultivation conditions of various cordicid species especially Cordyceps sinensis. I told you a few minutes ago about this species, and also here I only want to demonstrate justification of these efforts for optimization of conditions for cultivation. Few years ago, I think that it was 2013, when was one conference about medicinal and edible mushroom in the China. I found this data that 1 kilo of stroma, remember stroma I showed you, cost about $7,000 US in the Thailand, but in America, in the United States of America, this price is about 10 times higher. And that's why so many countries in the world, but especially China, do so many efforts for optimization of the conditions. And I was in some farms of this mushroom, of this species, micromycete species, but some special results there is not. Mushroom commercially cultivated, so many species nowadays are commercially cultivated, but based on the substrate which can use, all mushrooms or micromycetes can be divided into two huge groups. Majority of the cultivated species belong to the group of primary degraders. This means that these species possess very strong enzymatic system and can use various lignocellulosic residues as substrate for cultivation, and that these residues, these lignocellulosic residues, should not be transformed or prepared before for cultivation of this kind of mushroom. But opposite on these primary degraders with fantastic enzymatic system, secondary degraders like Agaricus bisporus or some other species of the genus Agaricus possess very weak enzymatic system, and that's why some specially prepared substrate known as compost is needed for cultivation of Agaricus species. But I want here to talk about these primary degraders. This means species which possess very strong enzymatic system, especially ligninolytic enzyme system, which can degrade lignin from the cell wall of plant residues, and can convert a huge amount of lignocellulosic residues in not only in the high valued food, this means fruiting bodies of the mushrooms, but also in a feed or in a paper or in the biofuels or something like that. Compost or substrate composed of lignocellulose residues after picking fruiting bodies of mushrooms can be further used. And here you can see for what? For preparing of feed, because mushroom degrade lignin, and this spent mushroom compost become more digestible for the liver stock. Then this spent mushroom compost can be used for the preparation of paper. Maybe you heard about paper pulp, which we obtain after cultivation of mushrooms. This means after effect of ligninolytic enzymes of mushrooms. Then for preparation of biofuels, nowadays is a very popular bioethanol, and based on the declaration of European Union, until 2025, about 20% of all fuels, used fuels in the world, should be replaced by biofuels. This means bioethanol. And in all phases in the production of biofuels, fungi take very important place. Then in cultivation of earthworms can be used this spent compost, like fertilizer. This means nature fertilizer without any side effect, not only to our health but also for environment. And this is my field of interest, and I want to emphasize bioremediation. Spent mushroom compost can be used in various kinds of bioremediation, but especially for bioremediation of soil, because soil is very contaminated with various phenolic compounds. The ligninolytic enzyme system of the mushrooms are not specialized. This means that all compounds which possess phenyl ring or can be degraded by these enzymes. And numerous, maybe the most toxic and the most danger compounds, chemical compounds, are phenyl compounds. This means possess this phenyl ring and can be degraded by ligninolytic enzyme system of the mushrooms, which are extracellular. This means that mushrooms produce and secrete extracellular ligninolytic enzymes in the compost. This means in the substrate during cultivation. And what is the result of everything mentioned until now? The first, after cultivation mushroom, we have not waste. This means zero emission or total productivity. And the second result of this, new opportunities, especially for developing countries. And that's why some organization, world organization, do on the increase of awareness of the people in these developing countries to cultivate it, mushrooms, not only like food, but also this is new opportunities for new jobs, for reduction of poverty, etc., etc. And this is like review of everything mentioned. You can see where we can use edible and medicinal mushroom. This means not only in the food production, but also we can use in the pharmaceutical industry, because I have already mentioned the numerous biological activities of the mushroom. Numerous tablets, capsula, tonics, etc., etc., can be used like food supplements. Then numerous mushroom species are used in cosmetic industry, especially in anti-aging creams. Not only Ganoderma lucidum, but also some species of the genus Travятся possess some special place in the cosmetic industry. Then in production of the biomass, this means that under controlled conditions in the fermenters or bioreactors, we can produce not only mycelium as biomass, but also we can produce some metabolites, some extracellular metabolites of the mushroom. Then in chemical industry, now we talk about that, about fertilizer, paper, biofuel, mycopesticides. Mycopesticides are very popular nowadays. Then in bioremediation, I have already told about this, in various fundamental study, and in agriculture and forestry, not only for obtaining feed in agriculture, but also in the forestry. I don't know if you know, but species, wood species which live in the symbiosis with some micromycete species, for example, with the species of the genus Boletus or genus Murhela, grows 3 to 5 times higher than the normal species without this symbiotic relationship. This is one of the reactor for production of the mycelium biomass or production of some extracellular metabolites. Other pictures you can see various fruiting bodies of the mushrooms from, for example, Agaricus bisporus, Ganoderma lucidum, this is Pleurotus ostriatus, Lentinus edodes, Pleurotus syringi, or king oyster mushroom, etc. Numerous food supplements on the world market, cream and tonics used in cosmetics, and of course pharmaceutical industry. Numerous effects or biological activities mushroom possess, and I have already told you about some of these effects. Now I want to emphasize only two the main effects. This is immunomodulatory and antioxidative effect, the base of all other effects which possess mushrooms, because mushrooms and micromycetes generally consider as modifier of biological response, and usually mushrooms affect either as immunostimulators or adaptogens. This means that improve our immune system and have no any side effect to our health and our organs. All these activities are based on some metabolites produced by mushrooms. And here you can see various metabolites, but I want to emphasize significance of polysaccharides, which are beta-glucans based on their chemical structure and possess very strong, but really very strong immunostimulatory activity. And that's why numerous polysaccharides produced by mushrooms nowadays are used in the combination with conventional cytostatics. And fantastic results can be obtained in the treatment of patients who suffer from some kind of or some type of cancer, and after surgery, together with cytotoxic, use some polysaccharides originated from mushrooms. Besides polysaccharide proteins, glucoproteins, this means complex of polysaccharide and proteins, numerous phenol compounds, this means not only phenol, but also flavonoids, tocopherols, etc., etc. Terpenoids, fatty acids, steroids, lectins from the mushrooms are very popular nowadays, and numerous studies are done with these metabolites, dietary fibers, etc., etc. I choose only few biological active compounds produced by mushroom species, and I want to introduce with these compounds and these products. There are many more compounds, there are many more extracts and drugs based on the mushroom species which can be found on the world market, but crestin or PSK, this is one polysaccharide protein complex synthesized by Trametis versicolor and possess very strong immunomodulatory and cytotoxic activity, and this metabolite from the mushroom species, one mushroom species, is officially put on the list of auxiliary drugs against various cancer types. In China, more popular is the PSP, one polysaccharide peptide complex also synthesized by Trametis versicolor. And I hope that majority of you know how Trametis versicolor look like. Other species of genus Trametis also possess numerous biological activities, and I know a few years ago I have done numerous studies with Trametis hirsuta, Trametis zonata, and other species, Trametis gibosa, and numerous activities are I found, but very interesting activities of species of the genus Trametis was something new. This is anti-neurodegenerative effect. This means effect that especially extracts of various traumatic species can inhibit activity of acetylcholinesterase and tyrosinase. These are the two enzymes which higher activity lead to the development of Alzheimer and Parkinson diseases. And this is something new, some new kind of studies in the world to find nature anti-neurodegenerative drugs or compounds. Then Lentinus edodes, fruiting bodies of Lentinus edodes are source of lentina. The first isolated and characterized water-soluble beta-glucan, this means polysaccharide, isolated at the end of 16th year of the 20th century in Japan, and characterized and very strong cytotoxic activity against sarcoma 180 was demonstrated when this polysaccharide was separate or isolate. Schizophilin, also water-soluble beta-glucan, originated or synthesized by Schizophilum commune with very strong immunomodulatory cytotoxic activity, but especially against cervic cancer or cervical cancer. Grifola frondosa and Grifola promaitake, one glucoprotein, this means one polysaccharide protein complex. You can see here 70% of beta-glucan, 30% of protein, one very active, biologically active complex, which possess very strong anti-cancer activity and which can maintain normal cardiovascular function. And I don't know if you know, but cardiovascular diseases present the main risk in the world of mortality. More people die from cardiovascular diseases than from cancer nowadays. And that's why Grifola frondosa and many other species are very popular like food supplements. People daily take various mushroom-based products. This means products based on the Grifola frondosa or some other species, for example, various Pleurotus species, like prevention against cardiovascular disease. Then polysaccharides from Agaricus brasiliensis or Agaricus blazei and Felinus linteus. You can see here all effects which possess polysaccharides of these two species, but I want to emphasize immunomodulatory effect and very strong antioxidative effect. All other effects are based on these two effects. Nowadays, on the world market, you can find numerous preparates against osteoporosis and especially against cancer ulcer, which are based on polysaccharide of these two species. Ganoderma lucidum and other Ganoderma species, you can see about 400 compounds in 2050 were isolated from the species of the genus Ganoderma. I want to demonstrate that almost every day some new compounds is isolated from these species. When I start to work to do my PhD thesis, it was in 2002. Only 108 tree terpenoids were isolated from Ganoderma lucidum. In 2015, when I prepare and write my book, about 150 tree terpenoids were isolated. That's why I told you that this date of 400 compounds isolated and characterized from Ganoderma lucidum sensu lato, this is data from 2015. Nowadays, maybe this number is significantly higher. Ganoderma species present the best sources of triterpenoids, and triterpenoids possess numerous activities, not only cytotoxic activity, but I want to emphasize antiviral activities. And that's why species of the genus Ganoderma are commonly used in the treatment of AIDS-positive people in the world. Tremella mesenterica and other Tremella species, especially haploid mycelium of this species, eukaryotic mycelium, cannot be cultivated, and that's why fruiting bodies of these species cannot be cultivated. But haploid mycelium, which produce glucuronoxylomanan, this is one very biologically efficient metabolite of this species, can be produced under control conditions in these huge fermenters or bioreactors in significant amount, and nowadays you can find numerous preparates based on this glucuronoxylomanan, this protein, this polysaccharides. Lovastatin, the strongest natural hypocholesterolemic agents. This means that the most efficient nature preparates or natural products in the reduction or decrease of level of cholesterol and triglycerides. And these metabolites is metabolites of various pleurotus species. I think at the end of 20th century, Professor Zimmerman from Slovenia isolated and characterized this compound from the pleurotus striatus fruiting bodies. But after that, these preparates or metabolites was isolated from fruiting bodies and from mycelia of many other species of the genus Pleurotus. And mechanism of action of these metabolites, you can see inhibition of key enzyme in cholesterol metabolism or cholesterol synthesis. Here you can see all species which can produce lovastatin or which produce lovastatin as primary metabolite or during primary metabolism. And at the end, like conclusion of everything mentioned, I told you that I only chosen few biological active compounds produced by mushrooms. There are so many other compounds. There are so many extracts which can be found on world market and which can use for the treatment of various diseases and disorders. But this is so small number. That's why I put here the fact that edible medicinal mushrooms are relatively unused source, because there are so many opportunities which can be used primarily for our health and improvement of our immune response. And of course, trend is the intensified studies and development of culture technologies and many other studies, but also there are so many trends also in pharmaceutical industry based on the mushroom products. And maybe the most important, the two last trends, education of people, but not education in only developed countries, but especially in developing countries. This means on the world level, and integration of Eastern and Western medicine, because commercial drugs, which we commonly use for the treatment of various diseases and disorders, possess numerous side effects, contrary to these nature products, for example, mushroom-based products, which have not any side effects not only to our health, but also for environment. All what I want to tell you, if you have questions or maybe you have some interest and I didn't mention in this lecture, I wait.
Thank you very much, Professor. You can ask questions in English or in Russian if you want to. I will translate.
First of all, thank you for a wonderful lecture. So interesting. One question about actually this slide. So in my understanding, I'm not like an ill person. I don't have any serious disease, so I'm not specialist in drugs, and illnesses, and so on. But to me, it seems that like treatment based on mushrooms is like not mainstream so far. So maybe in China, yes. Maybe in Japan, I don't know. But to me, it seems that in Russia, if you will tell someone that you need to take mushroom drug, they will think this looks like some sorcery or something. Can you agree with this point?
Yes, of course. Because in my countries also people don't use mushrooms. I use mushroom because I spent China so many times and
okay, the next part of my question.
Okay.
We know that most powerful and most important mainstream drugs usually are made, produced by big corporations, and this is a lot of business in this very important drugs, like for cancer, as you mentioned, and so on. So lots of money are involved. And if somebody will tell, oh, you don't need to buy that, you can go to the forest, I don't know, pick this, pick that, mix, I don't know, boil, and take 3 spoons a week, and you will be okay. So this will impose huge threat on those big money, right? And so maybe we can think that there should be some sort of counter mushroom lobby in this industry. How do you think?
Nobody of serious mycologists and serious biologists will tell you do not use commercial drugs. You don't need to use commercial cytostatics and you should use only mushrooms. Nobody will tell you that because mushrooms are not drugs. Mushrooms are food supplements, are functional food. This means that this is food which have numerous positive effects on our health. And if you listen carefully what I talk now, I told that like auxiliary drugs in combination with commercial cytostatics or commercial other drugs, not only for against cancer, but also other drugs. And maybe prevention of development of some disease, in my opinion, this is the most important. And that's why, for example, I found one data that 80% of United States population use functional food for the prevention of disease. And each day use some mushroom-based products. And maybe this is more important to prevent some disease than to treat some disease. Not only for our health that this is better, but it has so many positive financial effects. But this, what you told, okay, go to the forest, pick up fruiting bodies, eat fruiting bodies, and don't take drugs, nobody will tell you that. And are you for pharmaceutical industry?
No. No photo. No photo.
Thank you for the lecture. And I have two questions, but I need help with translation.
Но вы можете по-русски говорить, я вас все понимаю, но я буду отвечать по-английски, потому что не знаю, что сказать по-русски.
Тогда несколько десятилетий назад в русскоязычной литературе давало мнение, что грибы, при том, что содержат большое количество белка, но практически не усваиваются, потому что белок хитинообразный и не развивается в организме. Как вы можете комментировать это мнение?
The first chitin is not protein. Chitin is a non-water soluble polysaccharide, and it was not any effect for absorption of proteins from the mushroom species. And I want only to give some sample that, for example, in developing countries where still exists famine, that means loss of less amount of food, people use mushrooms as the main source of proteins, and proteins from the mushrooms are excellent absorbed by our organism. And heating affect little bit bad on our digestions. That's why, for example, mycologists propose to take this cover on the cup, on the pillows of fruiting bodies, because this cover, this like membrane on the surface is full of heating, and if you take this, you have not any digestion problem after eating mushrooms.
Thank you. And next question. Как вы можете откомментировать тот факт, что Голландия использует галлюциногенные грибы очень широко и, пожалуй, является, основным способом? Пожалуй, это является, ну или это выглядит как основной способ использования грибов, и почему это сконцентрировалось именно в этой стране?
В этой стране все сконцентрировалось, если я могу сказать, извините, пожалуйста. Я там не была, но мои друзья там живут. I have not any comment to that fact, because in Netherlands you can find everything on the street and on the shop. If you want, if you have money, you can buy what you want. And why not psilocybe? I don't know what species of genus psilocybe. This is psychoactive species about which you talk now.
Я знаю место, где они в лесу растут, но никому не скажу. Еще вопросы у кого-нибудь есть?
Thank you. Thank you for the lecture. I would like to ask about symbiotic relationships between trees and mushrooms. You told that you can use it in forestry. What kind of connection between the growing of the trees and the mushrooms, and which kind of trees and mushrooms you mean?
This depends on the mushroom species. I can only tell some samples for mycorrhiza or mycorrhiza. I don't know how it's correct in English. But for example, some species from the genus Boletus or from the genus Tuber or genus Morchella, Ascomycotina, live in the symbiosis with trees, but various kind of trees. For example, Tuber, species of the genus Tuber, live in symbiosis with species of the Quercus, Fagus, and last results which I found with various kind of citrus. For example, Fagus species are very suitable for growth of various Boletus species, and also for Morchella species. And people who we call this hunter to the mushrooms, these people who collect mushrooms in the forest, knows places where, for example, Morchella esculenta grow, and this is the biggest secret of these people. Mushroom, this means micromycetes which live in symbiosis with tree, take organic compounds which produce plants during photosynthesis, but also mushroom or micromycetes give a huge amount of microelements. This means trace elements in the shape or in the form of various salts. Because I don't know if you know, but various mushroom species are excellent absorber of various trace elements. And some mushroom species present excellent biomarkers which can show a situation in the environment when we talk about trace elements. Because some species belong to the group of so-called hyperaccumulators of trace elements. And these trace elements, mushroom incorporate in they are metabolites, and plant from this relation, this symbiotic relation, use these microelements. And that's why I told you that, for example, this is the last date which I found, that, for example, species which, tree species which live in a symbiosis with some mushroom species, possess 3 times higher growth rate than species which live without this symbiosis.
Okay, thank you very much for your lecture. Actually, I have a few questions. The first question is general about if there is some correlation between the, let's say, the history of the nations, for example, in using mushrooms in, let's say, as edible products or like for treatment. And let's say you just already mentioned that in Eastern Europe and in Asia, mushrooms have been used for a long time, but in Western countries, so it was like in the very latest time. So is there a correlation between the development of the nations historically, depending on the location and using the mushroom?
I don't know this. First, I cannot tell book, but something like journal. I found maybe 20 years ago, and author of this journal is one professor from St. Petersburg, and it was enough strong trigger for me to search some other data. I don't know why, for example, Western European countries didn't use mushroom through the history. I cannot connect this or associate this with history and tradition. I don't know this. I know, for example, that this trend stay in that countries. For example, Germany and Great Britain is the biggest importers of fruiting bodies. This means that production of mushroom in these countries almost do not exist. I don't know why, but I found this.
Okay, thank you. And another question is related to the medicine. So there are a lot of fungi that are like causing diseases in the bodies, in the human bodies. So could you just make some comments about that? Like because there are like a lot of drugs made from fungi, but there are also a lot of fungi that's causing some diseases, some skin diseases or intestine diseases. So could you just comment on that? Thank you.
Okay. But you and I talk about different kind of fungi. You talk about microfungi, which are causal agents of various dermatomycosis or some systemic mycosis. I talk about edible and medicinal mushroom species, which metabolites possess very strong, not only antibacterial and antiviral effects, but very important antifungal effect. Yeah, I don't know if you know, but I'm not sure exactly, but between 80 to 90% of all diseases, not only human diseases or animal diseases, but especially plant diseases, are caused by fungal species, this micromycete species. And you talk about that, I talk about mushrooms or this other part of fungi which can treat or which can heal this dermatomycosis or some other mycosis. Yes, yes. My group of mycologists at the faculty do these studies with microfungi and various mycoses, various kind of mycoses, and study mycotoxins produced by this species, which can be causal agents of various diseases and very serious diseases. I only read about that because I'm professor and I must know that because I have lectures, but I don't do with this any studies. Well.
Спасибо, Мирьяна. У меня будет вопрос с небольшой прелюдией, и я его буду задавать по-русски.
Хорошо.
Sorry, my English. Назад я в Москве познакомилась с интересной группой независимых микологов, которые утверждают, что у них в руках есть список видов и технологии получения из грибного субстрата веществ, обладающих афродизиаком.
Хорошо.
Ага. Вот. И причем, значит, среди исследованных видов у них были грибы, соответственно, виды, которые производили вещества, смещающие баланс стероидов. Да, и тут я вот действие понимаю, как биоразмножение развития. Но были грибы, то бишь вещества, которые никак не влияли на баланс половых стероидов и релизеров. Вообще никак. Биохимик, какую группу веществ вы бы предположили в качестве вот этих действующих веществ? То есть не влияющие на баланс стероидов, но имеющие грибное происхождение. Значит, я вот сейчас, они, разумеется, весь список не открыли, разумеется, да, но мутулусы там были точно.
I don't know all mushroom species, but and I didn't do experiments with this kind of mushroom effect. I only have read about that, and what I found in the literature, maybe the strongest mushrooms or compounds produced by mushrooms, in that case, this is Pleurotus syringe. And so many compounds produce Pleurotus syringe, and so many experiments were done with rat and these compounds, these metabolites. These are so-called low molecular weight compounds, which very well penetrate to the cell and possess very strong effect. I only can tell this. I have not any other results. I didn't find until now, but I must be honest that it was not very interesting for me. Maybe there are more data, but I didn't find it.
Еще вопросы?
One more short question. It seems to me that in your presentation, there were listed about maybe a dozen of mushroom-based drugs or, how to say, supplements.
Food supplements.
Food supplements from China. And I have lived in China for about 1 year overall, so I'm quite acquainted with the culture of this country, but not very deeply. and I could see their traditional drugstores, like looks like they're ancient with bottles and so on, not like Western countries. And I think that these are obviously connected. Their ancient culture of mushroom-based drugs, which have grown to current state when it's moved towards, I don't know how to say, up-to-date medical knowledge, something like that. How do you think? Can we trust these mushroom-based drugs from China? Because I can imagine that there are many, but are they trustworthy in terms of Western scientific knowledge?
I must be honest, and you cannot trust to any chemicals or any drugs based on the mushrooms, not only based on the mushroom, but based on some natural products. This means also plant drugs, because there is not any certificate, any rules of preparation for these drugs. This is not important if these drugs prepared in China or in, for example, I don't know, in Italy or in France, because there is not any, how to say this, like protocol, how you should prepare, how you should grow or cultivate these fruiting bodies and to obtain some active compounds. Because we do, my small group from the Belgrade University worked this. We cultivated various mushroom species on various substrates with various additions, for example, microelements or additional nitrogen sources. And you cannot believe how these ingredients, this addition to the substrate, affect biological activity. If you buy, for example, some mushroom-based drugs obtained in my country with responsibility of some serious mycologists, maybe this is absolutely different effect of some other drugs by nobody. It is not important where, but from the same species, because you don't know where and how these fruiting bodies or this mycelium, which was used for preparation of this drug, were cultivated.
So,
and not only species or strain possess effect on the quality of drug, but also cultivation conditions is absolutely in the first place, because all metabolites possess a few isoforms, and all metabolites are coded by few enzymes, by few genes, and which genes will be expressed depends only on cultivation conditions. This means that if you, by cultivation, for example, of Ganoderma lucidum, obtain one kind, some terpenoids, by cultivation of, I don't know, wheat straw, for example, base substrate, this means that if I grow or cultivated the same strains of these Ganoderma lucidum species, will obtain these three terpenoids if cultivated my mushroom to, for example, oak sawdust based substrate. And that's why we cannot talk now about uniformity of preparation.
So in other words, we can say that this mushroom industry is very, very promising on one hand, but on the other hand, it is not like stabilized yet, and we don't have enough technological plus scientific proofs.
No, we have the technology, we have scientists, but we are only pure scientists and pure, professors. But people who produce this
Exactly.
possess only one one aim, and this is money. And this is not important how they produce some drugs or some preparates. It should be cheaper, and it can go to the market without any certificate, because this is not like serious pharmaceutical industry. You have a list of the basic information about each drug when you buy, for example, box of the aspirins. When you buy box of the Crestin or PSK, you have not this. You don't know origin of these strains of pleural or Trametis versicolor. You don't know any date where this grower or this producer cultivated this species. How they extracted this Crestin. This means how long do extraction, with which solvent extracted this metabolites, etc., etc. And that's why usually each second year we have conferences about medicinal mushroom, and next year it will be in China. And at every conference we have some like section when we discuss about that, to make more serious production of medicine, of mushroom-based drugs or products.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your interesting lecture and very useful lecture, I suppose, for everyone. And I have prepared a small piece for you to warm up, because not only maybe Professor will be also confused by some questions, at least a single one. I have prepared a question for you also. And my short quiz is about mushroom names. Actually, I have started making this quiz because I have found an interesting coincidence about a species Cantarella. Cantarella, по-русски это лисичка. And the story about Cantarella is that the true name of this fungi comes from the Cantarus. It's a Greek cup, a kind of pet. So it looks like a cup, and it's called Cantarellus because it's the same shape. But the coincidence is that clan Borgia from Italy, they used quite a poisonous compound, and they have called that compound Cantarella. So the extremely dangerous, deadly poison from Italy is called Cantarella. And we have a mushroom that is usually not eaten by nematodes. You know that Cantarella are usually quite clean of nematodes. So it's just a coincidence. And I have started exploring the mushroom names, and I have prepared 3 questions for you. I remind you that we are going to have a present for the person who created an interesting question, or maybe you will answer my questions. So it's like right now 0-0 for, как там, знатоки телезрители, ведущие и зрители. So, the first question is about the name of this fungi. This is Grifola frondosa, and the Japanese name for this fungi is maitake. Do anybody know the Japanese? No? Lucky eye. So, Ganoderma lucidum, the Japanese name manentake, and the translation, the explanation, 10,000-year-old mushroom. Lentinula edodes, or shiitake, extremely useful mushroom, fungi growing on a tree. And Grifola frondosa, maitake. Of course, you have not any clue, but I will give you this clue. This name of this fungi comes from the people who first found this mushroom in a forest in nature, and they were actually very happy. And the amount of stars here, those snowflakes, is the number of letters. So the first 3 letters is the article the. So the something something. I suppose the mushroom. The last word should be mushroom. So what ideas do you have? Be creative, please. Imagine you are poor Japanese people walking in a forest. You have only some snails, some whales in the sea, and you see a mushroom. It is very tasty, delicious. And what will be the name for this mushroom? Let's give a name. Actually, this picture doesn't have that at all. So imagine how you will call this mushroom. Let's make a name.
Cabbage mushroom?
Huh?
Cabbage?
Cabbage? The other name for this mushroom is the head of a sheep. Because it looks like a head maybe. But let's talk about Japanese mushroom. Maitake, what does it mean? So, what you usually do when you see something really...
You?
Huh?
You?
Yeah, when you see...
You mushroom.
Yuma, 8 letters. 8 letters. It's in this English word. Actually, we people quite usually do this activity. We don't do this activity right now, but maybe in the evening, especially Friday evening, you can go to the art pub, hear the music. And what we are going to do? Это была жесткая подсказка. So, Professor Staiич knows, of course, because chill out. Really close, but another word. No. Chill out. What does it mean chill out? What do you do when you chill out? Can you show chilling out? Chilling out.
Dance mushroom?
Dancing mushroom. It is the dancing mushroom, right? So Japanese people had found this mushroom, and they decided that it was a very happy meeting for them, and they just danced. So that was an easy question. A bit more complex question. It is about the species Auricularia auricula juda, and this Latin name Juda, the story of Judah Iscariot from the Bible. And it is called Jew's ear in English, in interpretation. In China, it is a wood ear, a wooden ear, a wood ear. And I ask you about the Japanese name. And the first word is wooden. And I ask you to see the shape of this mushroom and remember about the Japanese and the Japanese location on the map. Medusa, yeah. So it is wooden jelly or jelly ear. So 2 possible names. And the last question for today. This yellow mushroom can be found on Borneo. If you put it into water, it will absorb all water, and after that you can crush it and squeeze like this. And if you put it back, it will restore its shape and its properties. And I asked about the Latin name of this mushroom, and there are a lot of letters, and both letters for S. Sponge. So sponge. Okay. The first word is like a sponge, but the most interesting question about the second word of this mushroom. So sponge, and scientists have discovered this mushroom quite recently. It got its name, not spheroidal.
Called after square pants sponge, whatever it's
Spongiforma square pentia. Yes, so it's Latin Latin name. You know, scientists were very funny people. So thank you very much. We have 2 people who answered our question, and we will, with Professor Staiich, decide the most interesting question after that. And right now, I want to say thanks to everyone, and especially we have to say thanks to our sponsors. At first, it's Shop Book Look store, bookstore. After that, we have a scientific magazine, Science from the First Hands. You can take your personal journal in the entrance. This is our partner And our partner for us is a newspaper, Троицкий вариант наука. So it's the only newspaper in Siberia and probably the best newspaper about science. Our sponsor for us is souvenir shop called Eureka. You know this shop, it's on Tereshkova Street. And the radio 54. It's also our partner. So, and right now we move to a small game for you. It will not be related with mushrooms, luckily, fortunately, or unfortunately, or at last. So, Dmitry, please come to us. And I suppose that Dmitry will explain us the rules of this game in Russian, and you will have about 5 minutes